Welcome to Living Your Greatness. Each episode, we bring on great people to inspire you to achieve your greatness. We discuss topics all related to health and wellness. Listen to world-class stories, learn valuable lessons, and turn knowledge into action. It is now time for you to unlock your inner greatness. Welcome back, everyone, to Living Your Greatness. This is your host, Ben Mummy, and today we have a new guest to the show, and her name is Melissa Colleret. So for those of you that don't know who Melissa is, she is a lifestyle designer, a coach, a yogi, a speaker, a writer, and now a mother as well, too. Melissa pours her heart into everything she does. She's passionate about nature, vibrant health, nutrition, movement, mindset, and endless components of love. With over a decade of lifestyle design and entrepreneur development, Melissa bridges the gap between your current dream and reality while being present and enjoying the process, increasing your energy and making the most of life's simple pleasures. Melissa believes that you have everything you need inside of you to create an extraordinary life. You're here for a reason, to answer your deepest calling, to share your gifts, and to live life fully. So Melissa, it's great to have you on the show with us today.
Oh my gosh. I'm like, wow, she's interesting. Thank you. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. So good to be with you.
So starting off, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you spend your formative years growing up in Canada? What inspired you to become an entrepreneur? And why did you start a brand that focuses on health, wellness, and fitness?
Okay. Please interject at any time if I kind of deviate, because I'm going to try to be mindful of those three questions, but sometimes I get caught up in the story. So I'm actually where I grew up now. I grew up in a small town called St. Agathe, just about an hour north of Montreal. It's a place with the Laurentians, which is an area with like rolling hills. So I grew up snowboarding, playing in lakes and rivers, and spending a lot of time outdoors. And for the last 4 years, I've been living here. This is also a town that most people, like once they graduate high school, are like, let's get out of here. But life has brought me back here. And a lot of my friends who grew up here are also back. So I spent my, until the end of high school here, then I moved to Montreal. Did my studies in Montreal, lived in Vancouver, lived in Australia, lived in Tofino. So I moved around a little bit, only to find my way like back home, where I never thought I'd be. I never thought I'd move back to my hometown. And now sometimes I think, oh, it'd be nice to be in Costa Rica or Hawaii, but literally I wouldn't see myself anywhere else. My parents live 5 minutes away. My sister lived five minutes away. And right now that's so important to me. So that's where I spent my time growing up. And your second question was, why did I become an entrepreneur, or how did I do that? I always knew I wanted to have a career. I was good in school. In grade 4, I remember like my French teacher being like, she's bossy, which wasn't necessarily a good thing, but now I see it was, because I had a strong character from the get-go. Leadership skills kind of naturally ingrained in me. And actually personal development was thanks to my dad. He always shared that with us as kids. Like I'd listen to Brian Tracy tapes. I know you mentioned that in some of the questions you sent me, but I had the tapes in my Walkman. My dad and my family, we used to have like meetings on Sundays and like listen to personal development tapes. So that was kind of in the background. And truthfully, I thought I'd be a lawyer. I thought I'd follow quite a linear path, because I'm 10 years old making these decisions. So some people follow the decisions they made at that age, but my journey really started to shift after university, because, actually I studied commerce in college. And then when I applied to McGill, I thought I was going to go into international business, but I can see myself filling out the application and choosing psychology and not telling anyone about it. But I had loved my psychology classes in college. Anyways, did my undergrad. And then I did a year of osteopathy school. And in osteopathy, that's when I realized that I wanted to run a center and not necessarily follow the path of becoming an osteopath, which is amazing, but wasn't right for me. I wanted to manage things and it kind of started evolving like that. I started having visions of, even in high school, like as I'm talking to you, I made business plans and things like that. I had things I wanted to create. So I think it was kind of a natural thing. I got into network marketing. That kind of helped me get things like some foundations. Even though I never like succeeded in network marketing, it did teach me a lot about business. And then your third question was why health and wellness? The main reason was because my mom went through cancer while I was in high school. And so I was very much like touched by the impact of illness. And I lost most of my grandparents to cancer on both sides, except for my mom's father. Not exactly. I don't remember. I was too young. I don't remember how he passed away. But needless to say, experiencing that at a young age had a really big impact on me. And I remember when my mom was going through chemo and radiation, even with not knowing a lot about nutrition, I thought there was something really odd about what they were recommending in terms of diet. Like sugar-loaded foods. I mean, when you're doing chemo, like the goal is to, in a way, just keep some pounds on, because a lot, depending on the type of chemo. But there was something that was off about that to me. And I just started getting naturally interested in that. And then in my early 20s, during my undergrad, I got diagnosed with Crohn's disease, which is an autoimmune disease, digestive tract. And then I really started taking my health into my own hands. And I got interested in nutrition. I grew up in the restaurant industry, or started working in the restaurant industry. So I always loved food, but then looking at food as medicine, I just got really passionate about it. I got into yoga because I had broken my ankle. My dad did yoga like in the 70s. So it was always kind of in the, like my space, but then I got really serious about yoga through my own injuries. And I guess psychology was like the mind, but then I pursued a minor in kinesiology because I wanted the mind-body connection. And everything kind of started like evolving from that place. But I would say definitely like the experience as a kid was huge.
Thanks for sharing that background, Mel. In 2015, you gave a workshop presentation called Inspire to Empower. Can you please share with our listeners what this talk was about? Some key takeaways that are important.
Yeah, when I saw your questions, I was like, wow, that's such a throwback. That was such an amazing event. And I had to kind of think about it a little bit. But as I often do when, I reflect on things, I also want to share what's most pertinent in the moment. So first and foremost, Wanderlust is an incredible festival. They no longer do it in Trauma, but it's yoga and music festival. And I got the opportunity to lead a really special talk called Inspire to Empower. And the biggest thing was I wanted people to have a space to connect to what they truly wanted, which is something that's consistent in my message, and then to take action on it. So in a way, there's the way I guide people. I mean, that was more of a hyped up experience, but I really give people the space to go inward, ask themselves some tough questions. But one of my, I guess, superpowers is that I'm kind of a catalyst for people to feel safe to do that. And so some things that are difficult to answer when you're on your own, people tend to be able to share that with me, and even in a workshop setting. And my goal was not to only get people feel hyped up, because sometimes you go see a speaker and you're like, yeah, like that's amazing. And then come Monday morning, you're like, who did I go see? Like what happened? So my goal is really to get people to take action come like Monday. And even beyond that, I guess one of the key takeaways, and I'm going to give you one of my secret tools that I lead in a lot of workshops or courses that I lead. I have people write a letter to their future selves, and they wrote it at that time, feeling all jazzed up, like they're in a yoga festival. It's beautiful. It's sunny. Like the event was in the Lululemon, like, I don't know, mushroom dome, whatever. And a year from the date, I mailed to them the letter. So this was also them almost planting a seed for who they wanted to be, what they wanted to be celebrating, what they wanted to be reminded of a year into the future, and then receive that. And I get a lot of messages when people receive their letter a year later, because most people forget. But then they might actually notice, wow, I actually did the thing. Or, oh, I didn't, I really want to do it. Or all of this stuff happened. So I would say that those were some of the key takeaways, and really creating a a space for real connection to who we are and what we want, but not just in a like, oh, let's just dream about it. As much as I can be a dreamer, I'm also a realist. So I think that's also a place where I bridge certain gaps. Like I'm all about go dream, like think big, but then bring it down. Like what's the little thing you're going to do next? Who are you going to be next to get there? But I've evolved tremendously since that time. I mean, it was a while ago. So it's almost funny to think back. I'm like, wow, I do remember being high on caffeine. I'd had 2 coffees, which is not something I should do before a talk. Cause I was like, whew, buzzing. But yeah, that's a little bit about that event. And it was awesome. And even to this day, like some people still see the video on YouTube and get a benefit from it. I had an old colleague like record it. And so that's really cool too, to see that even years later, people watch it and they're like, oh, that spoke to me.
Absolutely. It was definitely a great video. If anyone wants to check it out, yeah, they could go to YouTube. I'll make sure to also drop that in the podcast notes. So Mel, going to my next question, you gave us a little introduction that you had an injury, but how did yoga come into your life? How has your relationship with yoga had an impact on you?
Yeah. This is so fun. So as kids, we used to play tennis with our dad quite a bit. And I remember playing with him and my brother and sister. And I don't know how we started talking about yoga, but then we stepped out of the court and my dad busted into headstand, probably like, well, to impress us. I don't know how he felt after doing it. But I remember being like, whoa, cool. And my dad practiced yoga. And so that was something he didn't practice regularly, but once in a while he would do this Shivananda kind of practice. And in CJEP, I did like our phys ed classes. Yoga is an option. So that's when I actually did yoga classes or started. And I had 2 teachers, 2 very different styles. I had one lady who was like, I think in her early 70s, who was a hard ass, a badass, and like, whoa, she had a hip replacement surgery and could do asanas like still some people I like know today can't. But she was tough. And then I had another one who was just sweet and kind and super feminine and like very different. So I got to experience the 2 styles and enjoyed both. And then I carried that with me into university. I would practice myself. When I got deeper into yoga was when I started working at Lululemon. I started working at Lululemon a long time ago, early 20s. Yoga was just kind of starting in Montreal. There was a handful of studios. And I remember I was practicing Bikram yoga, which is a style of hot yoga. And at the time I thought that was like amazing because I came from more competitive athletics. So doing a hot yoga class felt good. Like at the time I wanted to do triathlons and Ironmans. So I come out of that sweating and proud I hadn't passed out, So I practiced Bikram for a while until I started practicing other styles. And it's after I had cancer at 25, and that experience changed my directory in yoga because at the time I was practicing moksha yoga. I was actually a moksha trained teacher, which is another style of hot yoga. Now it's called Modo, but it was a kind of a derivative of Bikram. And after having surgery, and I remember going back into the hot yoga class, and I was like, this is how true beginners feel, because my body was so different after surgery. And it was just no longer what I needed. I really needed something restorative and healing. Hot yoga has its place, but I no longer needed the like high intensity type of practice. And so I started exploring different styles, and it continues to be an important part of my life, not just from the pose asanas, as we call them, a point of view, but from a lifestyle point of view. Because, the yoga as we know it is, in terms of like the practice, is just one aspect of yoga philosophy. There's a whole mindset and lifestyle that goes with it. And truthfully, I haven't been practicing enough of the physical practice as I would like. But my yoga is changed right now because I do like with my daughter. She's like a little Buddha. She teaches me a lot. But it's been fundamental in my life because it's a type of practice that I need. And I think what's beautiful about it you can really adapt it to where you're at in your life versus some other sports. Like right now, my left knee is bothering me and I used to run a lot, but that's something that's difficult to adapt when you've got a certain injury in that kind of sport. But with yoga, you can always find something that works for who you are and are becoming. So
thanks for sharing that, Mel. So Mel, why did you decide to open a yoga studio? What qualities do you feel are important to build as both a studio owner and a yoga instructor?
we don't have all day, so I'm going to keep it like laser focus. And if anyone has follow-up questions to that, they can contact you or contact me. It'll be my pleasure. I opened a yoga studio because, I mentioned I had cancer at 25. And after that, I really did a reset of my life, and starting with a cleanse, which I now call Revitalize. This is the first time I had been cleansing in my life before, but after surgery and just emotionally, I decided to do a cleanse in January of 2011, I believe. And I shared it with people. And then I did Landmark, which I had done already, but I redid those courses. So these are personal development courses for those who are listening may not know. And I needed that because I had worked with a psychologist, a mindset mentor, because it had played an impact mentally on being diagnosed at that age, even though I caught it really early. And needless to say, in one of my Landmark classes, we were like connecting to our vision for the future. And I was brainstorming all these project ideas, and I saw that what I wanted like 10 years down the road was to have a yoga studio. But my life experience had just kind of taught me that, like, why would I wait 10 years? And the reason why was because in my head, I was saying, well, I'm a new teacher. Who am I to open a yoga studio when I don't have 10 years of experience down my belt? I don't have the time. I don't have the money or formal business know-how. But I was in a space where I was being supported and was like, F it, do it. And I started creating the project that scared me, but that also lit me up. And for some miraculous reason, I mean, not just miraculously, I did work hard and I did call it in. The yoga studio happened. I called in my business partner, who was someone I had done my yoga teacher training with. And when I shared with her the vision, she was like, whoa, I wanted to open a yoga studio where she had grown up. And she was like, that's crazy. And then she called me a day or two later being like, I want to do this with you. Let's do it. And it kind of evolved from there, but it was really out of me exploring different ideas and giving myself permission to really lean into the scary one, the one that if I removed all the but and restrictions around, that's the one I would really do. And so I went for it. And it was an incredible experience. I think to open a yoga studio, I mean, in any business in a way, there's something beautiful about having a certain amount of ignorance, because if you like, it takes a lot of energy and time and will. So I knew a little bit about that, but then it's good to not know like how much it's going to take. Almost for me, that was helpful, because right now I'm like, would I do it again? I don't know. And I am a visionary, and I was very good at like creating and of seeing it. And I really enjoyed learning about the business side of things, doing the business plan. I was kind of like Jerry Maguire and being like, let's put it together overnight. So I had a very practical approach too that was really helpful in running the business. I've pretty organized. I could definitely become better at that, but managing is something I'm good at. However, when you're running a yoga studio, because we were teaching as well, you got to find a balance. You can't do everything. So my business partner and I did complement each other quite well. She was more the creative genius because she had a background in architecture. So surrounding yourself with people that have experiences that you don't, or expertise. You got to have a solid backbone, I think, because from my experience with opening a yoga studio is, you make your financial projections. Most people who open a yoga studio aren't opening it to like make millions, like on a suburb of Montreal. Like maybe if you're opening it downtown LA and you've got the vision like Bikram, there's some like outliers for sure. And we had a vision that I thought would expand for definitely, but if I were to do it again, I would definitely have my standards for financial success higher like they are now. But at the time I was in my early, like mid 20s, I had an apartment. I didn't have a family to feed. It was like it was fine. At some point it was like, hey, do you want to live on my brother's couch so that we can keep the business afloat? And at some point I was like, no, like that I'm not willing to do. So I think you got to be both a dreamer and get really practical, because you got to get down and like, you got to be willing to wash your toilets, and you got to be willing to do your financial projections and get really real about that too. Because that was something that I brought to my business partnership. I was like, let's really look at this, because can we survive? And so I think it's a balance for sure. And you don't have to like opening a business is your MBA. You don't need an MBA to open a business. Most students aren't, and MBAs don't, because anyway, so that was kind of my experience. It was definitely a great learning. It's still something that I'm so proud to have done.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing, Mel. In 2014, you decided to switch careers. You left your yoga studio and started a lifestyle coaching business. Transitioning into a new career path can be very intimidating and feel very uncomfortable for a lot of people. Why did you make this decision? What gave you the courage to pursue an extraordinary life and pursue your burning desires?
Ooh. Well, it sounds really lovely the way you asked it, but it was a pretty messy transition. I do remember when I left my yoga studio, because it was starting to feel pretty stressful. Two things were really important for me to make that change. One, my past health experience was still quite fresh. And I was like, I'm not going to let four walls bring me down, because there was this kind of morality of like, I need to stay. I had just realized a dream, but it was starting to have a serious impact on my well-being. So that was one thing of just acknowledging like, okay, you got to also know when it's time to stop. The other thing that had made a huge difference for me to leave was the coach I was working with at the time just allowed me to see that me leaving didn't change the fact that I had created it. Because there was kind of some shame around leaving, because I was like, oh my gosh, we're still in new studio. Who am I to do this? And I didn't fully know what I was doing next, because when I opened the yoga studio, I was like, this is it. Like, I'm going to open yoga studios all around, like outside of cities. Like, my life vision was set. Suddenly I didn't know what was next. I actually didn't know I was going to enter coaching. Although when I had my yoga studio, I was coaching people on the side, and my business partner didn't understand. She's like, how do you have time to do that? And it was so energizing for me. People weren't paying me to do this, but I really enjoyed coaching. I just wasn't yet at the stage where I could see it as a potential career. I was still new to the idea that your career could be something like fun and natural and, and part of an extension of you. I had often pursued things that I thought, although psychology was something I was interested in, but I was kind of taught like, just study like what you're good at, not necessarily what makes you feel good. And when I looked at my bookshelf, yes, I read some yoga books, but I read way more around business, mindset, health. Like that was way easier for me to read. So that's actually something I recommend for someone. This might be a sidetrack, but take a look at what you read naturally. That might be an insight as to who you are. I think that's important. It was for me. And then when I transitioned, I actually went back to waitressing I did a year of rebuilding my life. And first and foremost was like, I just needed a job, because I was like, okay, I'm leaving my business. And at the time, one of my old bosses called me to ask me if my sister was willing to work for him. And I was like, well, actually, I might be too. So my sister and I started working for one of our old bosses. So that was really fun, because I hadn't worked with my sister since we were teenagers in a restaurant in Westmount. And I just got back into the restaurant industry. And then I was also doing a lot of deep work to explore. You mentioned Danielle Report in our previous exchange, and I really worked through her fire starter sessions, which was really important for me in my development. I worked for a startup and had some cool opportunities. I actually applied for my MBA. And in the process of applying for the MBA is when I really saw that actually it's not an MBA that I want. It's I want to start my own business. And through the fire starter sessions, some of the questions that really stood out, one of them was, what do people thank you for? And that question really had me see that a lot of people thanked me for coaching them, for supporting them, helping them with their vision and goals. And it was like a light bulb. And I also helped open the Wanderlust yoga studio in Montreal. I was taken on as kind of the opening manager. And that experience too was, I thought maybe I'd start a business as a consultant to help yoga studios open. And I was like, well, most of them don't have the finances to pay me the way I would want to be paid. And that experience too made me see that, oh, I could continue with the yoga because people knew me and I was pretty well established in Montreal as a yoga teacher. Or I could start pursuing coaching more seriously. And I really kind of looked at the two paths and leaned into the future. And I was like, what would it mean for me to feel accomplished? What would greatness mean to me? And it was a clear yes to pursue the coaching. Because with yoga, I felt I had done what I needed. And I was happy to have it as my own practice. And I was still teaching. And as I built my coaching practice, I taught privates, I taught events, and I haven't taught since I became pregnant, but I'm still happy to teach when the event and circumstances are right. It's always going to be kind of a part of my being. But then I really started pursuing coaching, and I took a business class to really help me develop my business more online. Because when I had given my yoga studio keys back, I was like, I don't want to own a space. I don't want to be in charge of a physical space for a while. Now in the future, I'd like to have a physical space again, but not in the immediate future. So that's a little bit how I got into it. But I feel there were some questions that I overlooked, or is there around what you were sharing? So that's a little bit of my journey.
So what exactly is a lifestyle designer and coach? Why is this profession so important to you? And it seems like there's a greater purpose behind everything that you do.
So let's start with that, because that's more important than the title. So the greater purpose, this actually, I have Simon Sinek to thank for this and his work with the book, Start With Why. I really connected to why I wanted to do something. How did I want to show up in the world? Because I knew that I had skills that could be applied to many different careers. And so I started looking at, regardless of what I do, why do I want to do things? What impact do I want to have in the world? And I remember having a poster in my bedroom in my 3.5 apartment. And I had different words. And I was like, my bigger why, my bigger purpose, what is it? I was kind of playing with it. And what stuck and has stayed since is I want to inspire and empower people. I want people to live inspired lives, and I want them to love the life that they're living. So that's a key element, no matter what I'm doing. Even when I've worked in the restaurant industry, or because I've been in it on and off as I built my business, I would walk into the restaurant and be like, how can I inspire and empower today? Even if I'm serving sushi or something, so something that the purpose has remained, but the expression of that has evolved. And lifestyle design and coaching. So lifestyle design, that portion is really where I help someone look at, what kind of life do you want to live? Most people are taught what you want to think, what do you want to do? What do you want to be when you grew up? And most people don't answer that question with I want to be a good person, kind. I want to, be generous. No, I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a dentist. We actually respond typically with a profession, but I help people go deeper and see, how do you really want to show up regardless of what you're doing? But from there, establish what are the values. It's almost like I'm an architect for their life. I look at the pillars as their foundation. Who do you want to be in the world? What are the values you want to live by? And then what kind of life do you want to build? And I help them really create that. And when I say design, one of my clients this morning, I actually asked her to draw out the vision for her life. So there might actually be a visual design, but then there's also a planning. So for some people with the lifestyle, I do work with a lot of people who have an entrepreneurial drive. And so when they're creating a business, or even if they have businesses, I try to look at what else in your life is important to you. And let's look at all aspects of you holistically. So we're not just over focusing on one. So that's the lifestyle design component, is really looking at what someone wants and defining that and creating a certain plan that they can actually see themselves in it. Most people never express it because they've never been taught, what questions do you ask yourself? What do I think about? Because thinking about it and creating it is one thing, but then doing the work to build it is another. And that's where the coaching kind of comes in. So with coaching, I think athletics is a really great parallel. The players are on the ice. The coaches are behind the benches to support them in playing the game that they know they're meant to play, and pointing out the blind spots and helping the players reach and stay to their potential and beyond. the athlete knows how to play hockey. They know what to do. They know how to play the game, but they've got a coach so that they make sure that they don't give up. They make sure that they give it their all when, the going gets tough, and that they learn new ways to master their skill. That's what I bring in life coaching. Is my clients are on the ice in their life, and my job is to hold them to their greatness, and it's to support them in seeing that. A lot of people question. I have coaches because I often question myself, because my mind still tells me lies, and sometimes I still believe it. So with a coach, I can catch that. And I catch that with my clients either through the language they use, the actions they take, their body language, their energy. So I do bring different aspects to that. Now, there's many different styles of lifestyle design and coaching. Kind of like there's so many, a restaurateur owns a restaurant. There's coaches that specialize in many different things. We're talking about financial gurus. There's coaching, like you can have someone that's very specific on financial coaching for someone preparing for retirement. You can have someone life coaching that's support. Like right now, I'm really focusing on women who want to become moms, but I work with a wide spectrum of clients because of the work I've done over the years. So that's a little bit about it, but it's really about taking someone from point A to point B, but identifying what those 2 points are and then helping them cross the bridge.
Thanks for giving that explanation there, Mel. You and I met as well as both worked at Lululemon. During the company's onboarding process, Chip Wilson, founder of the athletic apparel brand, encouraged all employees to listen to Brian Tracy's goal-setting audio tapes.
Yes.
Chip wanted all employees to set meaningful goals inside and outside of their work. Do you believe this professional work experience contributed to the way you approach goal setting? What were some key learnings that you applied to your life?
Yes, so much. I wouldn't have worked at Lululemon if it wasn't for the personal development approach. I actually did not go to apply there for, the clothes. I didn't own any Lululemon pieces, I don't think. And the reason I did apply is because I knew that they gave employees Brian Tracy, the Psychology of Achievement, which I had already listened to in my Walkmans. And I also knew that they sent employees to Landmark, and I knew of Landmark, and I thought that was amazing. And at the time, actually, I remember on Green Avenue in Westmount, I was applying to restaurants because when you're in university, well, it pays well, but I was also wanting something a little different. I walked into the store and applied kind of on the fly, but really because of personal development stuff. As much as the clothes was an interesting piece, what I really loved was the company culture. And when I started, the company was still private, and there was very much a thriving aspect. So it had a huge impact on me because it also gave me almost like a playground for me to explore my skills as a coach, because I started really taking that on in my role. And I had the space, like my bosses would let me do that. And then even over the years, I always kind of led the coaching aspect of things. So I have so much to be grateful for that company and their philosophy that really resonated with me. I love that there was a core library. I loved all that stuff. Some might a lot, as you might know, some people weren't into it, and that's okay. I wasn't into the color codes. That wasn't or merch. I was like, okay, cool. It's nice to make a nice window, but it's can we talk about the books? I could have just done that. That's really all I cared about.
So this leads me to a question on books. In the book, The Desire Map, Danielle Laporte wrote, "Your core desired feelings should sit at the center of all your intentions." Now, do you agree with this statement? If so, could you share an example from your life?
I would say I partially agree. I think the only way for me to be a full yes to that is if you're also aware that you may not feel your core desired feelings as you take the action you need to take to get there. There might be a huge delay. For example, right now in my life, I signed up to a group coaching because after my maternity leave, reintegrating coaching and getting back into work mode. As a new mom, I knew I needed a new support system. And when I hired the coach or the group of coaches that I've been working with, I knew that to reach the level that I wanted to reach next, they would force me to face my shit. And it's not easy to do that. But I am, like, at my core, I know I'm doing that to reach the next level of my version of extraordinary, to meet that next version of me. So that's why I partially agree with that, because I think it's sometimes hard to remember that when we're in a very fast-paced world. Like, you want to feel happy instantly, or you want to feel successful, whatever that means to you. And I think that's really important for people to define that. But sometimes if you're keeping your core feelings, you got to recognize that it might take a while before you get there. But you still want to be fundamentally happy if, like, that's one of your core feelings. You just got to be mindful that not everything is instantaneous.
Absolutely. You have coached many entrepreneurs. After mentoring many people, what do you believe separates a good entrepreneur from a great entrepreneur?
Okay, so that's two parts. I think one, you got to define what being an entrepreneur is to you. I think what separates a good to a great entrepreneur is that a great entrepreneur is true to themselves. They acknowledge where they fit into the world of entrepreneurship, because the owner of your local floral shop is no less of an entrepreneur than the person on the cover of Forbes, unless they're not being authentic to themselves. So I think a great entrepreneur is really about honoring, like, what kind of person and business person you want to be. And I think also entrepreneurship, defining it for yourself and living into that definition, not the one that you think you should be living into. And I think good entrepreneurs can get caught up in, oh, this is what I should do. I should grow my business bigger. I should scale, or, you can easily fall into this idea of what you think you should, like, be doing. So I guess it's two parts. It's like, learn to play the game, but then well enough that you can create your own game, and that would be one aspect. And the other thing is, like, what's good? What does good mean to you? And what does great mean? I think people have different views of that. And that, again, would be a really important thing for someone to sit with. It's like, what does it mean to you to be good versus great? And can you live into that definition instead of letting someone else's definition of good versus great dictate, like, you? Because for someone, greatness is, and to people, it's completely different. So if you're not clear about what it means to you, then you can easily fall into the comparison trap, which, I still do sometimes. But when I sit back and I'm like, wait a second, am I living, like, my truth? Am I being authentic to myself? Or do I need to realign? So I would say that would be a big thing, because there's so many different ways to go about it. And you can be entrepreneurial without running a business too. You can be an entrepreneur at school, so that's where the definition of it comes. It's like, I really see it as, like, the spirit of wanting to create and lead. And if that means like running your own business, that's one thing, but you can really have an entrepreneurial spirit and kick ass in many different ways.
So Mel, this leads me to my next question. Entrepreneurship can be a tough road. In difficult moments, how do you stay focused on moving forward and making progress?
Well, I think that question, you could change the word entrepreneurship to life, or other things. But I think one, you got to know going into it, there's going to be challenges, and not seeing that as a bad thing. Like, if it's always easy, you probably won't stay engaged. And there's, like, different progressions to your evolution. So I think you got to, like, there has to be a certain amount of realism of knowing, okay, this is going to challenge me. So you have to be someone that, and I'm going to speak to it mostly from a business point of view, that being an entrepreneur means you're creating, you're taking chances, you're doing things that may not always have a guarantee. Kind of like I refer to hockey, but two teams, when they come to play against one another, both are playing to win. But both teams also know that only one team can. But you still go and play to win. So I think entrepreneurship is very much like that, like play to win. But you know that, you sometimes you can play your best game and still quote unquote lose. You might have experienced that in your athletic background or other things in life where you're like, I played my best game and it still didn't work out. So, and sometimes you didn't play your best game and you won. So I think entrepreneurship is like that too. Like let's say there's services or programs or workshops that I've led. Some have been super successful with less effort. Others that I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited, like crickets, so there's a bit of that, knowing that it's part of the game. And then when it does get tough, so part of my philosophy in moving forward is knowing also when you got to take a step back and taking a time to pause. Not everyone's like that, but I am someone that often needs to like pull off the side of the road and reevaluate. Be like, okay, what's my game plan now? Because as I continue on my journey, as I was sharing even with the Inspire and Empower workshop analogy, like my philosophy has changed, has evolved since 2015. So my business vision has evolved. And if I don't slow down enough to really look at what aspects of that vision I want to continue pursuing, or which ones do I need to prune off, then it might get a little messy. So I think part of moving forward is also taking a step back, slowing down, reevaluating your game plan periodically. And from the get-go, that was something I kind of incorporated in my life, of not just for my business, but my life vision. And that's been really helpful. And then being able to disconnect. I think too, it's good to take a step back, because then you come back refreshed and like, if you don't miss what you're working on, then you might need to work on something else.
So Mel, what advice would you give to a millennial who is just starting out their entrepreneur journey?
Have fun. Keep this essence of play. I mean, I'm saying that mostly because like, this is life can get serious. And when you're doing something you care about, depending on what you're up to, like the stakes can be high, whether it's like your level of risk, if you're investing in something. So if you can keep a certain sense of humor and play, which I wish I was better at, like I'm okay, but I think you got to enjoy it. Someone I admire in the snowboarding world, Mcmorris, who seems to just have so much fun snowboarding. And I think that's one of the reasons he's so successful. I love to surf. And so I love the hard stuff, even though it's hard. So I think you got to fall in love with the hard stuff and find a way to make it fun. And actually, we talked about Seth Godin in the beginning. There's something about pursuing and not like, it's like knowing when to quit. I don't know if there's like a set framework or rule about this, but there's certain things that you should quit before you engage in it, and other things you should know when you need to let it go and move on. So that will be maybe some inner work, because I think it's easy to quit too soon. And so when you're embarking on a project, or let's say a program for me in my as an example, I know I have to go all out, and I have also kind of a limit by when I will push. For example, it's almost like you got to set your rules, like your own game, and have a vision for the future. Maybe not too far. 10 years down the line might feel too far for someone, but 3 years comes by really fast. So it's important, I think, to have a certain amount of future vision that inspires you to do the work now. Get support. Be mindful of who you're taking advice from. Because if you're starting your entrepreneurial journey and you're taking advice from your aunt who has never had an entrepreneurial bone in her life, or I'm generalizing here, you got to be really mindful, because sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we want to please most. And if they haven't experienced what you're wanting to experience, you can easily get yourself discouraged. So that's something that I think is really important. That's why like hiring coaches or listening to podcasts like these, or reading books of people who are doing the thing you want to be doing, like get really intentional about that. So that like this, like what would that person do? Like have your core mentors. So their voice is in you to keep on going, because your mom is amazing, but her job is to protect you, and entrepreneurship can be risky. So, she might be a bit nervous. So I would say those are definitely some things to keep in mind.
Who are your greatest mentors?
Oh, they've evolved over the years. That's for sure. Okay. So spiritually speaking, I often go on walks and talk to myself. And sometimes I'm visualizing who I'm walking with. So Oprah and I go on walks. Like, I think about Oprah. There's something about her that I learned a lot from. In the coaching world, Rich Litvin is someone I really respect and look up to in his coaching approach. My two mentors currently are my dog and my daughter. And this might sound silly to some, but I think I have so much to learn from them. Like, my dog reminds me to play, reminds me to rest. And so he's my teacher for those things. I'm like, okay, cuddles are really important. Slowing down is really important. And like running after a ball is really important. So he's one of my mentors, because honestly, I need that. And then my daughter, her sense of adventure, and I mean, she's 13 months, but I would say even before having kids, my future kids were my mentors, because I would literally think about, what do I want to tell my kids one day? And I would sometimes write about that, but that was really a huge, and still is a really big source of inspiration and mentorship in the sense, because I have these kind of conversations, even though my daughter just babbles, but I'm like, what do I want to tell you 5 years from now about what I did today, or 10 years, 15 years. And then lastly, I would say my future self. I really connect to, okay, my 9-year-old self, who's like super wise and like still doing yoga with her long silver hair. What does she tell me? I take a lot of my inner voice. I'll add one more. Okay, I'm going over, but because I forgot, this is a practice, but this is something I've developed over the years. I'm not religious, but I do consider myself spiritual in the sense. I really connect to Mother Nature, God, and sometimes I will literally write to them and have them write through me. What's your guidance? And sometimes only through meditation I can get it, but when I need some deep advice, I write and let them write through me. Mother Nature is definitely, I should have said that first, my number one.
That's beautiful. Now, something that I admire about you is you're more than a lifestyle coach, yogi, speaker, or writer. As I had mentioned at the beginning, you're also a mother, a partner, and have other life goals, desires, and passions. I have noticed that you have started a new project called Create Your Motherhood. Can you please tell us a little bit about this and why it is important to you?
It is so important to me because, okay, I always wanted to be a mom. Like, I always kind of felt that in my bones. And I often felt the road to motherhood was a bit lonely. And one of my mentors, Ellie Ballantyne, who's an incredible woman, a few years ago gave me one of the greatest gifts. And she gave me the space to talk about why becoming a mom was so important to me. And I felt just held. I guess I kind of, before that conversation, and that conversation was kind of a wake-up call. It made me realize that I had often felt that when I shared my desire for motherhood, that it was often pushed to the side. That was more like, focus on your career, or like, don't worry about it. It was like, this is not something you can talk about, or it's like out of your control, or it's out of like, just let it, like, just see when it happens. But that conversation with Ellie changed everything for me. Because one, I was like, wow, how it was almost uncomfortable for me to talk about it, because I expected her to interrupt me, but she didn't. She let me go there. She let me talk about it. She let me expand. And in becoming a mom, I did a lot to prepare. And there was actually a time, even when I was single, where I really connected to why I wanted to be a mom. And I created my game. I started treating that goal in a similar way to my professional goals, with a different energy, a more feminine energy, because my professional life was a little more in the masculine energy. And I started seeing, wait a second, like, I've accomplished some really cool things in my life. And there's all these books around doing all that stuff. But are there books for women who dream of becoming moms? The same way there could be a book for a man who wants to be a dad or whatever. But right now I'm speaking more for the woman. And in becoming a mom, I really saw that the marketing around motherhood is very fear-based. A lot of women are a bit nervous about becoming moms, because if I speak just more at my, I'm an educated, privileged white woman. So I can't speak for every a demographic for sure, but I was given all these opportunities that were more professionally focused. And that has made it very difficult for certain women to consider their desire for having a family, because one, most women haven't been exposed to children, never less pregnancy or giving birth. So some women are really scared, like, holy shit, what happens to my body? We live in a very highly critical, like, body image world. So as much as some pregnancy can look really beautiful, for a lot of women, it's really difficult to go through that transformation because they haven't been taught like some basic biology and the beauty of that transformation. And that also makes conception difficult if there's all this stress. And if someone's lifestyle is out of balance, like, you might subconsciously be blocking yourself from that happening in your life. And so with Create Your Motherhood, I want to change that so that women feel safe to explore this. And not everyone wants to be a mom, and that's amazing. Like, I think the same that for someone who doesn't want to be a mom, like, feel free in making that choice for themselves. To someone who feels like, for me, one of the reasons I built my business, because I knew I wanted to have a family and build them like together. But so that's where Create Your Motherhood comes from, is to create a safe space for women to explore this, but then to also proactively prepare themselves mentally, physically, financially. I coached several women over the years who went through IVF. That's a really big financial commitment. And if you haven't thought of that possibility in your life before, that can like be all the more stressful if you don't even know how much it costs. And then suddenly you're having trouble conceiving and you want to explore that avenue, but you haven't even thought about it before. So I'm a lot more in the proactive kind of mindset. We're taught to think about our retirement. We're taught to write out our wills. I don't know many people who have ever taken 1 hour to sit down and think about, if I become a parent, what does that look like? What kind of parent do I want to be? And how can I start preparing myself for that? We spend more time planning out a vacation than we do this kind of really important role. And there's so many things we can do to make the journey easier. And I've learned from the things that worked for me and that worked for my clients. And I've also learned the things I didn't do that I really wish I had. Like, I really wish my partner and I had made it a non-negotiable to get some like coaching or counseling before having a kid. That would be one piece of advice for those in couples. But anyway, so that's where Create Your Motherhood comes from. Part of my mission, I always knew becoming a mom would influence the way I worked. And this came to me like one fall day, and I was like, who's speaking to the like aspiring mom? There's all sorts of things for pregnancy, fertility, and like new motherhood. But what about before that? Because when I related back to the marketing aspect of things, what I see in a lot of the messaging is that it's almost expected that you might break. It's almost expected that you might have postpartum depression, that you'll be so tired that you can't see straight, that it's going to be stressful. It's going to be hard on your relationship. There's all these things. So it's a lot of fear. And yet that all those things are happening when you're in it. Can we talk about it before so that you can like be empowered and already equipped to deal with those things beforehand? So that's where it comes from.
Amazing, Mel. As you know, the purpose of this podcast is to inspire people to achieve greatness and enhance their overall personal well-being. Mm-hmm. What is your definition of greatness?
Live your truth and have the courage to do that. I really admire those who do that. And I think that's great.
And being your true self, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And wanting to, and I guess greatness too, I think is like wanting to continue expressing the versions of you, the multi-layers. Like, I really believe we are just ongoing, evolving beings, and that's such a beautiful thing. And I think it's really great when people allow themselves a space to evolve on many levels. So yeah, I would say that would be part of my definition of greatness.
Awesome. Great. And so Mel, who is a future guest that you would like to see on the show?
Your mom. I thought about this before. Your mom or a relative in your life that has, I don't know your family history, but that I yeah, someone who has made a significant impact, but that might not be known in the public. I think some of the coolest people in my life don't use social media. Like when I had my podcast, I really wanted to interview my brother because my brother, I think, is such a badass, but like he's nowhere to be found and most people will never hear of him. But I think he's the coolest person on the planet, or one of them anyway. So I would love to see someone like that from your life that like no one knows about, but that, you know, has a lot of wisdom to share. Like, I don't know if your grandparents are alive, but learning from elders, I think they have so many cool things to share.
I accept that challenge. I will make sure to integrate at some point an interview with not only my mom, but also another one with my dad as well, too.
Oh, that'd be so cool.
So Mel, where can our listeners go to connect with you?
My inbox. I mean, they can go on my website, but that's an evolving being, melissacolleret.com, and you can contact me through there. I'm back on social media. So Instagram is where I'm at. Although I still believe in taking temporary breaks here and there. I'm in a like I'm on it phase, but I was off of it for a year and a half before. So if in the event that some of your listeners catch me when I'm not on, my website is always there. And yeah, that would be the best place. Right now, I'm really enjoying being on social media, but I think my pre-internet self wants to stay alive a little bit and take at least like 1 month off a year just to like get off the grid a little bit.
That's great, Mel. I will be sure to add that into the podcast notes. That way everyone knows where to go to find you. I want to take this last moment here to thank you for being on the show today. You've been very generous with your time, and it's been a pleasure to have you on. And I look forward to having you back in the near future.
It would be my pleasure. It was so nice. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Living Your Greatness podcast. If this show has added value, please subscribe, leave a rating, and make a review.